Hey guys, Ben from Back Photography here, and today we're looking at a photo shoot I did in a national park a couple days ago with Melissa Tyson. I'll leave a link to her Instagram if you want to check out more of her work. Before we get started on this tutorial, I'm just going to show a quick clip of Melissa nearly falling to her death, which would have been a bit of a disaster for the photo shoot, but luckily she gracefully landed on her feet. So yeah, we got pretty lucky. Thankfully no one was injured. Anyway, onto the tutorial. So the camera gear I used today was as follows. I used a Sony a7R II for the camera body, paired with a Sigma EF adapter, with a Sigma 50mm 1.4 non-art lens, and the flash unit I used was the Yongnuo 560 Mark III, just with a cheap eBay umbrella I got for 20 bucks. Here's a diagram of the lighting setup we used. It was just a shoot-through umbrella, 45 degrees camera right of the subject and 45 degrees above as well. The settings on my camera I used were a aperture of f2 with a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second and an ISO of 50. The reason I used an aperture of f2 is because I really wanted to blow out the background and keep the subject in focus, and the Sony a7R II I found with the Sigma adapter struggles to find perfect focus under about f2, so I normally don't shoot lower unless I'm using manual focus. I decided to use a shutter of 1/50th of a second so I could still use my flash without using high-speed sync, but because it was quite bright outside I didn't really need to stop down the shutter speed too low. I used an ISO of 50 because that's the lowest native ISO that Sony provides, so that just meant that I could use a low aperture of f2 and have a perfect exposure of the image. Okay, so let's get right into the Photoshop side of things. The first thing I noticed about this image was that my model was a little bit underexposed, so I'm just going to get the brush tool and add some more light to her face. So next I'm just going to add a little bit more colour into her skin and then also make it a little bit lighter as well, using the saturation and luminance tool. Next thing I did was I increased the vibrance of the whole image just to make the colours pop a little bit more. Then I adjusted the highlights, shadows, whites and blacks just to get the model's skin colour and exposure right, and then for the background I'll worry about that stuff later. The next thing I noticed was Melissa's eyes were a little bit dark, so I thought I'd just get an exposure brush, boost the exposure on her eyes a little bit just to make them pop a bit more, and also add some clarity as well just to make the edges of her iris a little bit more bold and also her eyelashes a little bit more bold as well. So after that I was pretty happy with how the model was looking, and it was time to start looking at the background. The whole image was looking a little bit cold, so I started adding some more yellows and oranges using the hue tool. The next thing I did was I got the brush tool and started painting in a little bit more yellow in the grass area. It took me a little while to get a colour that I liked, but I was really happy with the final result. After that I started adding a bit more yellow and removing some of the green in the trees in the background. I just thought that the really strong greens up in the trees didn't really fit well in the image when compared with the yellow grass and just the overall warm yellow tone of the image that I was going for. After that I got a big paintbrush with a lot of feathering and added some fake sunlight into the corner of the image just to look like it was sort of glowing on Melissa's face. Next thing I looked at was some of the blemishes on Melissa's skin, so I used the clarity tool just to remove some of the clarity from her face to smooth out her skin and remove any imperfections and blemishes around the forehead and the nose and the cheeks. I decided to go one step further and just de-clarify all of the skin on her body just because it looked really nice and smooth afterwards. After I removed some clarity from her skin, there was still a few imperfections in her face and a couple of other places, so I got the patch tool and just started removing all of the little lumps and bumps around her face. I wanted to make the eyes pop a little bit more, so I got the sharpening tool and just sharpened her eyelashes and her iris as well, just to make all of the tones around her eye more bold. Next thing I did on the image was a little bit of teeth whitening. Now her teeth were already pretty white, but I thought I'd just remove a little bit of the yellows and oranges with a handy tip I learnt from a Flern YouTube tutorial. After that I used the liquify tool just to make the model's pose a little bit more natural looking. Not so much to make the model look skinny or anything like that, but her shoulder was just posed in a little bit of an awkward position, so I thought I'd pull that down and also straighten her back and leg out a little bit. Next I took a selection of the model and then used the select inverse function just to get a selection of the opposite of what I selected, and then I had sort of like everything selected apart from the model, and then I used a blur tool just to sort of blur the background out a little bit more and give the subject more of a focus in the image. Finally, after that I just did a little bit more cleaning up. There was a few blobs of wheatgrass around Melissa's legs that I thought looked a little bit ugly, so I just used the patch tool to remove them, and that's pretty much the end of the editing. So this is the final image. I hope you like it. I really enjoyed editing it and I really enjoyed working with Melissa as well. Please leave a like if you learned something and subscribe for more content like this in the future. Thank you.